universe is calling. It just you feel like there might be something there. That would be the most incredible thing to find, an independent life. Another very happy. Yes.
I think I would say the same. I mean, of course, it would not be comfortable to be there. This is where we want to send a robot that can send back sort of virtual reality pictures of what it's like there, and indeed under the ice. It's not crazy to imagine that you could have a probe that penetrates through the ice and actually looks for anything swimming around.
With a stereo camera on it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Yeah.
There's another chap who wants to ask a question here. Is there one over here? Oh yeah, can we do that one first? Yeah, sorry I've neglected you guys.
Hi. So following on from the same sort of questions, and thinking about intelligent life, you talk about technological intelligence and post-humans. With that idea, is there not a danger that there's a divergence between post-humans and post-aliens? And how would you understand the signal that you might get from a post-alien technological entity to the extent that you would actually recognize it?
Yeah. Well, I don't think we would understand. I think the idea of a message we could decode is a sort of second order probability. But I think we could detect something which is manifestly not natural. Or some artifact that is not natural. So I think that's the most I would hope for. I think the idea that there is a message trying to attract our attention, which we can decode, is possible, but that's a second order improbability. It would be great if that happened, in fact some guy in the 1960s called Freudenthal wrote a book called How You Could Build Up a Language for Communication. You'd start by sending mathematical statements and get a vocabulary for mathematics, greater than, less than, and things like that. And then you talk about physics, and then you could generate a language. But of course, the problem is that the nearest such civilization would be tens or hundreds of light years away, so no scope for snappy repartee.
Another question here.
Thanks, guys. From a green sort of point of view, do you think we're jumping the gun a little bit here to say, this is going to happen in the future when, there's lots of problems currently on the planet?
Well, I think if you read Martin's book, which I'm about halfway through, and I'm absolutely loving it, terrifying though it is, I think there is an inevitability to it. Yes, there's all sorts of terrible things that can happen on the Earth, but there is no stopping this, really, because the research is going so fast, the development and the advance in technological abilities that we have.
But we've got to control it. I mean, there was a scary UN report saying that 1 billion species may go extinct. Of the 10 billion species, most of which haven't been catalogued yet, so we've been destroying the Book of Life before we've read it. And we've got to avoid that happening. And this is a motive for doing all we can to conserve the natural environment. And of course, this is important not just for us as humans, but because, as Brown said, it has value in its own right, quite apart from its value to us. So I think that's a priority, and if this makes our food more expensive, so be it.
Can I just add, one of the things I got from your book was the terrifying prospect that the more and more sophisticated our descendants become, our AI descendants, they can at some point decide that human beings, old-fashioned human beings like us, are not important anymore, and in fact are a plague on the earth, and get rid of them. If they're at the point where they're making decisions and we can't stop them, that's a very real possibility. And I'm realizing more and more, reading this excellent book.
Yes. It's not all so gloomy as that.
It's pretty gloomy, though. I mean,
but just to explain that, I mean, the reason it's so gloomy is that we've evolved because of two qualities, being intelligent and being aggressive. That's important for Darwinian evolution. In the case of machines, there's no particular reason why they'd want to be aggressive. So that gives me some hope. And maybe quite a long time, in my opinion, before we need to worry more about artificial intelligence than about real stupidity.
Next question.
So a lot of what you guys are discussing obviously involves the future and future of space technology, and obviously a lot of that hinges on, you know, young people like myself kind of coming into these fields and making these new advances. But, you know, so much of this information is, you know, blocked behind having to go to college or having to get a master's degree and not really having the access, the general kind of public access to this information. For people like myself that kind of want to learn more about this but are not really science-minded, kind of what suggestions do you have? Would you suggest, you know, studying stereoscopic images or looking into reading books like that, or are there other kind of, you know, avenues to get into it other than, you know, higher education?
Well, I mean, I don't think you need institutional higher education. I mean, you could buy these books and...
Have we mentioned the books tonight?
But there's a huge amount on the internet. Indeed, I think the scope for citizen scientists and amateurs is far greater than ever, particularly in astronomy, but in the rest of science. Citizen scientists will come. And I think one thing I say in my book, actually, is that it may be that the dominance of universities as research centres may be eroded, and we go back to more independent scientists, rather like in the 19th century. So I don't think we can assume that it'll always be universities which dominate research, and certainly for students and people who want to learn things, they don't need to go to university.
In fact, there's Zooniverse, isn't there? There
I was
was
just
lovely
going to mention
example.
Chris.
Yes, well, Chris Lintott, and he has a new book, incidentally, which
He
I
does.
also recommend.
Chris has been involving the public in doing research.
Yeah, yeah.
I should mention also that all these NASA and ESA experiments are funded by the taxpayer, and we do have access in the end.
Yeah.
They tend to hold on to it for a while because they want to work on it first. But in the end, it is all accessible. It's not that easy, but if you want to find out a piece of data from any time in the last 50 years, it is available.
And if you want to explore the Apollo story, there's the most amazing material on the NASA website, actually, which I'd really recommend. There's a question right over here. Oh, yes, fire away.
I'd just like to ask the panel, obviously the technical challenge of getting to the moon and back was a great achievement. Is the technical challenge of engineering and controlling the climate going to be possible, in their opinion?
Are you pro geoengineering, Martin?
Well, I mean, of course, what we really want to do with the climate is to, in my view, accelerate research and development into all kinds of clean energy and energy storage, so that the cost comes down and we can afford to depend on it. And more importantly, countries like India, which need to expand their energy consumption, will be able to leapfrog directly to clean energy and not build coal-fired power stations. So spending as much on energy R&D as on defence and medicine is, in my view, the top priority. And if we can do that, then I think we can stabilise CO2 concentrations in the Earth. I'm pessimistic of other ways of doing that. Now, geoengineering is the sort of plan B. If things seem to be rising to a dangerous level, then there's a possibility that we could cool down the Earth or cool down the Arctic by putting some material in the higher atmosphere to block out some sunlight. This is possible. Indeed, it's frighteningly cheap compared to other projects to deal with CO2. But I think before being happy to do this, we've got to understand the climate far better than we do, because we don't understand the climate in general. We understand that CO2 is going to warm the world on average, but we don't know what it does for weather patterns, the polar vortex, and all that. And I think it would be very dangerous if we were to have a geoengineering program before we understood its consequences better. And this may be a big international issue, actually, because it's possible for one nation, even one corporation, to put enough stuff in the atmosphere to change the climate. And we can imagine this happening in all kinds of litigation, and the only winners will be the lawyers, because if nations can litigate about bad weather, it's a bonanza for them, but not for anyone else.
You have a line on geoengineering?
Yeah, I think, as Martin says, the idea of actually controlling the climate from above is very, very difficult. But there are some elephants in the room. And apparently all the emissions of CO2 from all the gadgets that we have, the cars, the planes, the trains, whatever, is exceeded by animal farming. So if we just all stopped eating meat tomorrow, that would make the biggest difference.
Low carbon agriculture is a big, interesting area. Let's have a...
And artificial meat.
Arti-
Technology we should encourage.
Yeah.
And it's interesting seeing one US chain, let's take that person over there, is selling a Impossible burger with no meat in it, which
yes,
is rather
wonderful.
surprising.
I've had an Impossible burger.
Fire away.
I'm interested in the overview effect. Astronauts talk about this amazing kind of transformation when they see the world with no borders. And Michael Collins tweeted recently saying that if he could take every world leader to orbit to just see the planet. And you talked about we need to transform our character. Maybe that's the next thing we do. If we concentrate on sending robots rather than people, do we lose some of that?
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Well, there's a risk, but if we have the 3D and virtual reality, then we can all be given this same kind of impression, which in the past you had to go to the moon to see. But I do remember one anecdote. I remember hearing a lecture by Harrison Schmitt, and someone asked him at the end, what was your most memorable experience when you were on the moon? And he just sort of looked open-mouthed and said, being there.
Mind you, we've had both, haven't we? We've had the famous Earthrise image, which was an Apollo image, but then we've also had Voyager looking back on the solar system, and this
The pale blue dot.
the pale blue dot,
Yeah.
which is astonishing.
Michael Collins should know more than anyone, shouldn't he? Because he's the man who's been the furthest away from humanity ever. He was on the other side of the moon, looking at his colleagues here, and in the distance, the rest of humanity. They call him the loneliest man. I'm going to advertise now. If you go to Starmus this year, you might meet Michael Collins.
He's also on Twitter, amazingly, which is just started up. Anyway, let's have the next question.
Hello there. Is that working? Yeah, hello. Where do you believe black holes lead to, if anywhere?
Aha. Brian, do you want to go all interstellar?
Well, it's obvious, isn't it? I have no idea whatsoever.
No. Yes.
Martin?
Well, yes. No one knows. I mean, most likely you are what's called in technical terms spaghettified. You're torn apart, and you're going. But you won't be able to tell people outside what your experiences are, because light can't escape. It's no good me sending a student. They can never tell me the results. And of course, in Interstellar, we saw this guy going through the wormhole. And in fact, I watched this film before it was released with the Times film critic, and I said, it was quoted, that this guy seemed to be shaking around like being on the Northern Line.
Which is a black hole. Those tunnels are. Yeah.
Let's have another question right over here.
So this is a question for Brian. Because the song that you wrote, 39, is about time dilation, do you think that with the advances of technology, that the inspiration behind the song could become a possibility?
I'm so glad you asked that. Were you paid? Yes, I claim to be one of the very few people on this planet who have written a song inspired by general relativity. And yes, for those who don't know, it's the story of a man who goes off and explores the universe to try and find a place for humanity to go, because the Earth is running out of steam. I wrote this when I was quite young. What happens is he goes close to the speed of light, and by the time he comes back, he thinks he's been away for a year. His body has aged just 1 year, but to the people on Earth, it seems like it's maybe 100 years, maybe it's 200 years. And this is not really fantasy. This is actually what would happen. It's not really science fiction. It's very, very possible, if we manage to attain those kind of speeds, that it could come true. But I was interested in the human part of it more than anything else. I was thinking, what would it be like to come back and all your relations, all your family, all your friends have gone, and effectively you've been thrust into the future, and you're looking at your grandchildren, and I thought it would be a very hard thing to deal with. So the song is about that. Really. What was the question?
Sorry. Do you think that the inspiration behind it would become a possibility with
I think it could become a reality. Yes, I do. Yes.
Let's have another question on from this side. We've got a couple more minutes left, so let's try and pack in 2 or 3 questions. Fire away.
Just wondering, if you were to imagine life on Europa, what do you think it would look like? How would it have evolved?
Yes. Over to you,
No,
Martin.
no idea.
He's very white and spindly.
Yes.
Kind of a bit edgy.
Well,
a bit-
who could predict those creatures they found 6 miles down in the ocean? You know,
Yeah.
you just don't know.
Answers on a postcard.
Lots of hands going up. Let's have the next one over here, perhaps.
When do you think humans will first set foot on Mars?
When will humans first set foot on Mars?
That was a hard one.
I would bet in 25 years.
Which is still...
And that'll be these private companies.
I would guess sooner if Elon Musk gets his stuff together. Who knows? Yeah.
Let's have another question from this side, just over here.
Hi. You both talked about lack of communication between Russian cosmonauts and American astronauts and about rivalries between scientists. Do you think, apart from the technological challenges, we need to overcome our prejudices as human beings in order to drive things forward?
It's an interesting question. There is an irony, isn't there, which we sort of touched on. You know, we regard progress as being made by people coming together and cooperating, but that's not what happened. That's not how we got to the moon. It was because of the enmity and the striving to beat the other guy that we got there. So, what would you say, Martin?
Yes. Well, of course, that was really not a scientific project. It was a Cold War project. But I think I would say that scientists are the group who can more easily transition boundaries of nationality and of faith, because science is a common culture. Protons and proteins are the same everywhere in the world, and we all look out at the same sky. So I think scientists are better at bridging gaps than most other groups of people professionally.
It should be said, though, Martin, shouldn't it, that there are... I seem to remember Jim Lovell came to the Museum of Apollo 13, and he believed that the next step would have to be an international cooperative venture, and there is that. I know you think it's going to be Elon Musk, but there are quite a few people who think that China's going to have to cooperate with America or with India or whatever to make the next big leap.
Well, they are, but the question is, will they be motivated to do it?
Yeah.
It'll still cost them 20 or 30% of the entire cost. So that's why, I mean, there are some things like dealing with climate change that have to involve the entire world and regulations and all that. Whereas I think that space exploration by human beings needn't be of that kind. People talk grandly about we will explore this as humanity, but it'll be a few people, a few adventurous people who will be the pioneers.
Let's have one very oh, sorry, Brian, go on.
It's interesting that Trump has already set out the next stage as a race, hasn't he? He's already made it a competition. So I would guess there would not be cooperation between Trump and the Chinese.
Oh, no, actually, that's very unlikely now you put it like that. Let's have a very last question right at the back over there, and then...
The scientists would want to, but the world leaders would not. So I should shut up then. One more.
Hi, I was wondering, suppose we do land on Mars and create successful bases on it, like colonies. Do you think someday, obviously it'll take a lot of resource endeavors, but could we maybe create a planet or a moon habitable, you know, breathable atmosphere, gravity, heat, right temperature?
Terraforming, isn't it?
Yes.
Fascinating.
Yes, I mean, we couldn't change the gravity probably, but one could, over several centuries, create an atmosphere. In fact, there's Robert Zubrin is a person who's thought about the cheapest way to get to Mars and how we could transform it. So it's not crazy to do this if there was a motive and if you wait several centuries. But what is a dangerous delusion is thinking that we can go there and do this more easily than deal with climate change here on Earth.
Well, look, thank you so much for those brilliant questions. There will be copies of both these books available on sale. I mean, sadly, Brian has to dash off, but Martin will be here to sign books. And just very finally, good night, and do give these two brilliant speakers one last round of applause.